Hey guys, my name's Nova, this is Film Express, and today we're going to be talking about the new Luca Guadagnino movie, Bones and All. I'm so surprised because I'm not a big fan of Luca Guadagnino. I was not a big fan of any of his films before this one, but this might actually be the first film that I really like. This is an impressively directed film. It has so much subtext and so much nuance. I find that it was such a rewarding experience for me to watch. Yes, it was kind of gross. Yes, it was really cold and distant, but I feel like everything here was super purposeful and it made for a film that I really ended up enjoying. The score here by Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross does a lot of the heavy lifting, like there's no doubt about it. Their score is actually one of my favorites of the year in every way. It really adds so much to every scene. It elevates every scene. It might not be the type of music that you can listen to outside of the film, like on a CD in the car or something like that, but it's the type of music that in the film, in the context of the film, really improved every single scene, and I really loved it for that reason alone. The cinematography in this film was very, very unique. It was beautiful in so many ways, and it kind of reminded me of something like Paris, Texas. If you guys have seen that movie from way back, it's a classic film, and it has some of the very iconic imagery. I feel like this was a little bit of a homage to them. There were so many beautiful landscape shots. There were so many beautiful compositions and framing choices. They maximized on the use of natural lighting in almost every scene, and it really elevated every scene in my honest opinion. So we'll talk about the acting now. Timothee Chalamet, in all honesty, I'm not the biggest fan of him. He's an actor that I mostly tolerate, and I can understand his appeal, but I don't think he's ever done a performance that has stood out in my honest opinion. He's super serviceable here, by all means. This is very true. He served the story very well, but I was never really impressed with his choices compared to the choices of every other actor in this movie. There were a couple scenes in this, to be honest, that his performance almost took me out of the film, but at the end of the day, he was pretty good. It was all right. He held no candle to Taylor Russell. She was so fantastic in this film. She really had so much emotion. She was really believable in this performance. She knocked it out of the park, in my honest opinion. But the two standouts, we'll start with one, Mark Rylance. Mark Rylance deserves a nomination for Best Supporting Actor for this role 100%. He was so perfect. He was creepy. He was menacing. He was nuanced. He added something completely new to his character, and this was a performance from him unlike any of his that I've seen before. So he's really pushing himself as an actor, and I really, really appreciate that. The other actor who stood out in this film is Michael Stuhlbarg. He's always been one of my favorite actors ever since I saw him in A Serious Man. Any single role I've seen him in, even in Call Me By Your Name, he always knocks it out of the park, and that's no different here. He did a fantastic job in this very short amount of screen time. He crushes it, and it goes to show that there are no small roles, only small actors. With a film that has this many fantastic performances, it really kind of stands out when a couple of the performances, like some of Chalamet's scenes or even Chloe Sevigny's scenes, they are not up on the same level. So those scenes really stand out, unfortunately. But overall, everybody really did a good job. You guys obviously must know this film is about cannibalism in some way or another. The cannibalism serves as a really big allegory for many different things. It can obviously be seen as a very surface level cannibalism story, and that's fine if that's all you get from it. There was so much more to the cannibalism that really elevates this film for me. So the cannibalism here seems to be kind of an allegory for addiction, junkie addiction in the US, which is a huge rampant problem with opioids and morphine and heroin and stuff like that. But it also can be seen as an allegory for sexuality and identity, finding your identity and stuff like that. And I think both reads and both versions of the allegory really serve the story really well. So it really depends on how you choose to see it. And I think from viewing to viewing, that allegory might take on different meanings, which is a really good compliment that I can give this film. You know, on one hand, they talk about the rush of eating people and how it feels like they're describing a drug, makes them feel high when they do it. It lends itself to, you know, the huge high rates of opioid abusers during the Reagan era, which is when the film is set. It's an interesting idea that they're all very like low income, kind of grungy looking, you know, very sickly looking characters. And it also kind of shows that it's almost generational, and in a sense that is very, very true to how addiction is. You know, oftentimes, addiction will pass on, not through genetics, but through kind of learning behaviors and watching behaviors, which I find it's a very, very strong idea. I really think there's a strong case about the cannibalism being a metaphor for like sexual fluidity, sexual identity, and sexuality in itself. Also just like finding acceptance in the world, because obviously back in the 80s and the 90s, we weren't so progressive in our thinking as we are today, and we weren't as accepting as we are today. We all know Luca Guadagnino is kind of an advocate for LGBT cinema. He's an open homosexual, and his films have that identity to them. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's really the deeper meaning here. Like there's a really interesting dynamic between Michael Stuhlbarg's character and an interesting cameo from David Gordon Green, but their dynamic has a very kind of homosexual feel to it. There's scenes with Timothee Chalamet where you kind of get a sense that he's bisexual, or that he's just open with his sexuality, which kind of lends itself as well to the cannibalism, because he kind of uses that as a tool. And I think that is a very strong idea as well. And even in the first scene, Taylor Russell is at a sleepover with this girl, and spoiler alert, she attacks her and kind of feeds on her. Before she does, it almost feels like they're turning each other on. There's like a really intense kind of tension between them. At least in Taylor's performance, you get a sense that like she's very passionate about this, which I find again is super interesting, and it adds a different layer to the context of the cannibalism here. There's so many scenes like this that have multiple dimensions to them, and that's really why I think the film succeeds on such a bigger level than just a simple cannibalism love story. It's definitely way beyond surface level. It runs pretty deep, and again, it really just comes down to the audience member and how much you want to analyze or what you can take away from it. Unfortunately, the film is not flawless. I do have some problems with the screenplay, especially in the execution. The script is brought to life beautifully by Guadagnino, but there were so many lines of dialogue in this that just felt so forced, or too on the nose, or even just cheesy, cringe, whatever you want to call it. For as many bad lines as there are so many really well-written ones, so it's not a failure of a screenplay. It's just that there are some moments that stand out so much in how bad they're written that you almost lose your immersion for a quick second. And I know this is based on a novel. I have not read the novel, so I'm not sure how accurate the dialogue is to the novel in itself. But I feel like whenever you adapt a book to a screenplay, you take some liberties, you change some things. The directors and the writers, they add their own twist to it in production as well. So, I won't blame it on the novel. I'll just blame it in the script to screen translation. There was something missing there. There was something that wasn't up to the same quality as the filmmaking itself. There was so much tell, don't show in this. I'll always come back down to show, don't tell. This is something I learned in every writer's craft class or every screenwriting class that I've taken in my life. You show with actions, you show with characters doing things. You don't explain the story via dialogue, and you don't explain backstory via dialogue as little as you can. Sometimes it can't be avoided, and sometimes it can be done in an interesting way, but to rely on that solely to move your story forward is a very cheap tactic almost. In this film, literally for most of the film, you're being told backstory via dialogue and via voiceover, in a sense that it just feels like it's very cheap. It's a very easy tactic, and that's again one of my flaws with the movie. In a sense, those moments where it tells you stuff without showing you things, those really hold the story back, because the story could have been an all-timer for me. I do want to watch this again, but I don't think it's one of those films that's going to end up on my favorites list of all time or whatever. It's still one of the better movies of the year, don't get me wrong, but I can only love it so much when the script has this many issues. There was a scene at the end, the climax scene, if you will, the final moments are really, really intense. It plays off like a horror film. It comes off really, really strong in terms of imagery. And then again, the dialogue and the way the script kind of plays that out really, really ruins the intensity of the moment, at least for me. I know a lot of people like it. You'll know what I mean, but it comes down to something Chalamet says in the final moments that just becomes so laughable. I even heard people in the audience kind of laughing when they shouldn't be. It's a very, very serious moment, but it comes off a little bit comedic. There are many, many people who love that ending. It's beautiful in a sense. It's just the couple of lines of dialogue that take away from the intensity and take away from the beauty of the moment. Overall, though, I have to say I quite like this. It's the Luca Guadagnino movie that I'd rate the highest so far. This year has had so many mediocre movies, so this was a really, really refreshing, nice surprise. I actually didn't have high hopes for this film just because I haven't liked his films in the past, but seeing this one was a pleasant surprise. I rated between a 3.5 and 4 stars, 7 or an 8 out of 10. And for that, you know, it's commendable, and it's just one of those movies that you have to see for yourself and you have to make up your own opinion, because it can be super divisive. I know one of my friends didn't like it, but I really enjoyed it. So with that being said, guys, my name's Nova. This is Film Express. That was my review of Bones and All. Please give the video a like. Please give the channel a subscribe. It would really help the channel a lot, and I'll bring you guys more reviews as soon as possible. I'll catch you guys later. See ya.